everybody, and welcome back. We're at the ESO headquarters at PAX West 2016. Our next panel is tailored in Tamriel with lead figure artist Tatiana Malinko. She's going to explore the parallels between creating costumes in-game and out. She is a seasoned costumer, as you can see. So take it away.
All right. Well, hello, guys. So my name is Tatiana Malinko. I'm a lead figure artist. For those who don't know, figure art is a department in our company that creates everything character-related, whether it's player character, NPC clothing, characters themselves, faces, bodies, clothing, armor, weapons, any kind of creature, mounts, animals, pretty much. All of that is created by the guys that work on our team. And so this is the bunch of guys that I have to work with every day. Yeah, Kevin. So there are two Kevins. The one with the brush, that's Kevin number 1. Then the blonde one behind him, that's Kevin number 2. Then there is Barry, Greg, Joe. Kelly is right in the middle. Then right behind her, the crazy guy with crazy eyes, that's Gabe, Rico. Then down below, you would see myself, and then next to me, it's Cody and Pete. So these are the guys that actually create everything character-related for Elder Scrolls Online. In addition to these guys, of course, we have a very talented group of concept artists that create concepts for the, in this particular case, for the costumes. And I'll talk about it a little bit later. So let's just talk about me. Who doesn't like to know about me, right? Long time ago, in a galaxy far away, there was a girl that wanted to be a costume designer, or maybe a circus performer, or maybe an architect, or a sculptor. Eventually, she became a video game artist. But the reason I got into studying art was because I actually wanted to be a fashion designer. That dream kind of died along the way a long time ago when I decided to become an opera singer. But that's another story. But I actually have never stopped making costumes, and just even regular clothes, and but more. So I was very interested in historical costume recreation. You can see one of them in here. This is, I can't say that it's historically accurate. It's just my interpretation of a Russian 17th century Boyarina costume that I did just for fun. People kept asking me, my friends, like, because I would spend so many hours doing these things. That's in addition to daytime job. And they would ask me, like, why are you doing this? Like, because I can't stop doing it. There was no particular reason. I didn't have any use for them. Eventually, I used them a little bit when I was working as a model at the art school. But, you know, they really like to draw models wearing interesting costumes, and I did get some use out of this. But I was just making them because I liked to. I like to do the research into how, in this particular case, the headdress, which is called kokoshnik, was made, you know, and I was doing all sorts of research online how to recreate it with modern day materials, because the original ones, nobody uses them anymore. You cannot really find them. So it just kind of like went on, and I started to do, eventually started to do some kind of just purely fantasy costumes, not based on anything. You can see one of them on screen right now. I actually have a twin sister who is also an artist, and she's a photographer. So we do these joint projects where we have this idea that we need to express, and, you know, we would design costumes, accessories, and like we would go to location, and like we would shoot this particular one. It's just to represent an animal spirit. This was fairly recently shot in Mexico. Now, eventually, I started to do cosplay because I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, and those are the costumes well, before that, actually, this is right here, you can see Khajiit light armor. I made that way before it appeared in game because I had access to the concept art, of course. So I made it, and I wore for, you know, like Halloween at the company, but like nobody outside the company recognized what it was, and I was kind of sad because it was several years ago before anybody saw what they're supposed to look like. Probably would be cool by now, but, you know, I'm doing other things now. So eventually I moved on to doing, you know, more of a cosplay stuff. And Same thing, I'm not really making them, I hardly ever go out to conventions and such. I just make these costumes because I really like to do research into how they were made. I would find how the actual designer went about doing it, or in this particular dress, the embroidery, how it is done, and I would find the exact same materials and try to recreate it. Now, I do use some of the modern materials that I use for cosplay, such as Warbler, and I do 3D printing. I have a 3D printer at home. I do Sculpey, for sculpting of elements, but that's only because I don't work with metals. If I did, I would actually be like forging it out of metal, had a workshop. But everything else I'm trying to do, like if it's, for example, for the Daenerys Targaryen, let me skip forward just a few to show you. So there is in the middle, there is Daenerys Targaryen dress that I did. This is 100% silk chiffon that I had ordered from China, and I hand dyed to a very particular color because I just like to recreate it as close as possible to what is seen on screen. On this slide, you also, well, you could see my famous or infamous Khajiit costume that nobody recognized back then, and recently I did a Katy Perry cosplay just because I really like that video clip, and it's just so wonderful color-wise, and not much historic reference there. Well, I mean, there is some Egyptian motifs, but it's really all contemporary pop culture. So back to the presentation, as it were. So this in here you see Cersei Lannister costume as seen in season 3. So I did the armored corset that I used Warbler for that, and then there is a 3D printed necklace that you see I'm wearing, and embroidery. I actually took it off the dress and I put it on my jacket. Just people, if you like to see it up close eventually. I don't buy it, I promise. These are some of more projects that we do with my sister. We did like a mermaid kind of theme fairly recently, and these are purely just out of my imagination. This is also another one. This is has to do with Slavic mythology. It's a half bird, half woman. She's called Alkanost, and we shot it in Maine. We would just travel to locations actually, and this one was particularly crafted for that location because I described to my sister what it looks like, and like we needed to do something in those colors, and we invented this costume. So now I would like to talk a little bit about the materials that I use. Because I believe that my constant research into the real world techniques for making jewelry, right in here you see the large yellow necklace, that's actually glass beads and gem embroidery. I do actually quite a few of those just for fun. I learned it actually fairly recently, discovered this form of art, and I just fell in love with it, and I made a whole bunch of them for no particular reason, but I like to make them. And then there is illustration of a 3D printing process. Anybody who's done with 3D printing knows how it is. I do a digital model first on the computer, then I translate it into the software, and it's printed, and then I do all sorts of patina, test it until I find out the one that works well for me. In the same slide, you can see actually that I am, if you watch Game of Thrones season 6 finale, Cersei dress that she wore in the very beginning, there are these large silver line embroidered emblems on her shoulders. I'm working on that costume right now. You can actually see one of the finished emblems right there if you would like to come up later a little bit up closer. And there is actually another of the necklaces that I have crafted recently up there. And you can see me actually in my full Russian regalia right there. So in here is the close-up of the embroidery for the Cersei Lannister costume. So for this one, I went to, so Michelle Clapton is the costume designer, and Michelle Garaher is actually, she's the embroiderer dedicated to the show. So I actually, I'm on her website all the time, reading about how she makes it, which material she uses. And so I just had to find all of the materials, and, I hand-stitched this embroidery, and it was a lot of fun. Took a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun for me. So this here is one of my earlier projects. That's when I was doing just purely historical costume recreation. And this one is, this is a painting that I really love, Lucas Cranach the Elder. It's called Judith. Even though it portrays biblical character, she's actually wearing a Saxon court dress, circa 1530. And I have tried to, even though I chose different color fabric, as you see, but I tried to recreate it as close as possible, and that was also a lot of fun. The hat is not done quite right. I found that out later. That's not the kind of, so I have to make a new one now. But so where I'm going with all of this, historic reference is very important when actually designing and creating costumes for an online world of Tamriel, because for anything you see in game, for it to be believable, it has to be rooted in some kind of reality. It could be a fantasy costume, but it still has to be constructed in mind, like how the real costumes are usually made. And a costume can tell a story. Whereas, like, if we look at the, actually looking at the Judith costume, you could see the slashed rolls on the sleeves. You've seen it in medieval costuming actually quite a lot. What that has to do with is with people of substance and wealth trying to show off that they can actually afford more than one layer of cloth. So they would slash the like very expensive velvet, and then they would pull, you know, like some very flamboyantly colored silk fabric through it, and so on. And then they would have, you know, like there are undergarments that also made of silk and whatnot. So it all has to do with showing off just how much cloth, and especially very brightly colored cloth that they could afford, because starting with the ancient times, everybody knows that purple is a color of royalty. It has to do with the fact that the purple dye was extremely expensive. It was made in Phoenician city of Tyre, and it's made of the glands of sea snail. It takes about 250,000 of snails to make 1 ounce of paint, of that dye. And so for that particular reason, it used to be, until synthetic dyes were invented in the 18th century, it was a very expensive dye. So as such, only very wealthy people could afford it, and then Byzantine Empire kind of adopted that color as a color of power, and it was actually forbidden for the ordinary citizens to wear anything purple. Same thing with red, and why I'm telling this is, even though right now players can tint their costumes in game, but when we actually finish a costume, all of the costumes are actually tintable to begin with on our end for a long time, actually. But it's just the system wasn't there to allow players to tint it until recently. So, but they were all authored with tinting in mind. But when we actually put it out as like, this is a costume, we actually choose the colors and dyes that are very appropriate for the culture and for the kind of story we want to tell with the particular costume. In here, in this high-colored ball gown, clearly she's a Breton lady of some wealth. So there is puffed sleeves. You see like purple, reds, and, you know, like a lot of gold. Red was also in Europe. It was a very expensive color because it was made out of this tiny little bug, Mexican bug called cochineal that was brought from the New World, and like about a pound of red colored wool cost more than average citizen earned in a year. So it was extremely expensive. So there is, when we put colors and, you know, we dress NPCs, when we dress NPCs, obviously we're the ones assigning the tints. We actually really consider the colors. Nothing is ever random. Now going back to presentation, so here is one of the first kind of civilian costume clothing that we made. I actually have authored this one myself, and this is a noble dress, and as you can see, it has changed a little bit. This is just a high resolution sculpture of it. Eventually it was modified a little bit, but you can see the things that I'm talking about, and you know, there is embroidery, there is like beading on it, there is rolls of slashed clothes around the waist. I had to take it out around the sleeves because it was just too much. But, and then there is also a corset that is constructed in a way such as that it could be taken off if necessary. Even though it's digital clothing, no, it takes only one click of a mouse or a button to take it off. But if those things such as, you know, we have to think how is the clothing put on and how do we take it off, because if those things are not present, people will know that there is something wrong with the costume. It just does not look believable anymore. Plus, you know, these are the things that gives artists an opportunity to actually provide more visual interest to the costume as well. All of these minute details take a long time to make, but we really make an effort to make sure that they are all present. We already talked about this gown here. This is another one of my favorite. For a reason, you see the fully beaded apron that she's wearing, and of course, you see the actual reference that was designed around the time that I was really obsessed with making beaded jewelry. Plus, it's a culture. This is, inspired by Bosmer culture. These are kind of native people in touch with the nature, where colors come in play again, because the beads we really try to make them only natural sort of gemstones. We were looking at the beads made of seed pods and amber, turquoise, that sort of thing. So just to make it look like they crafted it out of naturally found materials. This is a three-thane ceremonial dress. Now I want to walk you through creation of just one dress from beginning to end, so you would get an idea of how we go about creating these in game. So this is the Desert Garden Gala overdress. This is a Redguard inspired dress for hopefully like noble women. The way we start, there are different costumes. If you play a game, you know that there are some just one-off costume, like treasure hunter, like some just that have like a coolness factor to it, that have some kind of story attached. But then there is also more of a just civilian clothing, and usually we design them in packs of 3. Everybody knows it by now, probably, where we like to cover various activities that a person who owns the set would do, just like in real world. Historically, if you take any villager, for example, they had sort of like 3 tiers of clothing. One is everyday wear, you go and you do your everyday thing, and then another one is sort of a holiday occasional wear, usually on the weekends, or you go to church or any kind of service. Those are a little bit more upscale clothing, and then there is of course like over-the-top ceremonial dress, which people, it's like it's a wedding dress, or it's something that you wear for a very special ceremony, like maybe once in a lifetime, maybe a couple times in a lifetime. So we usually keep these principles in mind when we're designing these packs of costumes, so that people who do role playing can actually, build up a nice wardrobe where they could just change in and out and play whatever it is they like to do with the costumes. So this particular one, it was designed as a pack of 3. So far we've only made 1 because we really needed it for an NPC, but the rest will be coming soon. So in this particular one, if you look, so the first step is actually concept art. And as I mentioned, we have a team of dedicated, very talented concept artists. So it starts with just, in general, us talking with the artists, and there is the art director, associate art director, myself, and we kind of describe, first of all, which culture it belongs to, and then like where do we want to go with it, what kind of story we want to tell. And an artist, then concept artist, goes and does a whole bunch of just rough thumbnail sketches, and then we review all of those, and we pick kind of like our favorites, and like let's explore it some more. And then he does some more drawings. Eventually, we kind of like settle on a design that everybody kind of likes, and then an artist goes and does very clean line drawing, like you see that one in the middle is one such. So he does a very clean line drawing to just show the design, and that's where we actually talk about what is the purpose of this dress, and again, how do you put it on and take it off, what are the embellishments that go into it, like does it have embroidery, what kind of fabrics is it made of, because fabrics are actually very important. Because obviously Tamriel is a sort of ancient world, so it is believed that most of the fabrics are natural fiber fabrics, and natural fiber fabrics, of course, respond to aging and weathering in a very different way than synthetic fabrics do. And this is just for artists, for us to like make the cloth look believable. So if we actually we have these long discussions, like, is it made of silk? Is it made of wool? Is it made of cotton? Maybe linen? This particular one, the overdress, is made of silk velvet. At least those were my directions to the artists. And we have provided some very detailed examples of it. So the overdress is the silk velvet, and then she is actually wearing silk jacquard dress inside of it. And there were also like long discussions as to how it is buttoned, which side the buttons go on, that was already with an actual artist who was building the costume. So After the clean drawing is done, then we have these long discussions where I would provide samples of like, these are this type of fabrics we could use, and then the concept artist goes and applies them, and like, how do you like that? And, and eventually, so you see this page contains a lot of actually reference material. There are the types of trim that goes into it, the actual like line drawing of this is how it would look like, but this is the technique we want to recreate it with. And after that, it's actually a very fun step is this one. And I don't know if any of you know about this fairly brand new software on the market. Well, it's been there for a couple of years. It's called Marvelous Designer. And it completely changed the way the digital clothing is represented, because the way you do it, it's you can see on one side it's a complete garment, which well, we did not render the character inside of it, but it actually there's an actual character on which you drape it. But pretty much an artist has to draw out all of these patterns which look exactly like if you were to make it in real life. And stitch them together. There are darts, there are, there is hemming, there is, edging, all of that is involved. So in order, even though our team consists of very, very seasoned character artists, cloth making is actually discipline in its own. And that's why we actually have a dedicated artist named Kelly who does these cloth simulations for us. She is actually avid cosplayer. She does actually cosplay much more than I do. Her name is Evail. If you ever, she goes to a lot of conventions. I believe she's at Dragon Con right now. She does amazing costumes. And so as you can see, in this, like, there is like her Espion Gijinka, and then there is the turquoise by the artist Sakizo, and then there is Alcyon from Magic Knight Ray Earth. She does like tons of costumes, and that's why she is the perfect person to actually do clothing simulation for us. After the clothing simulation is finished, and sometimes she does adjustments to design, because if it just does not drape the way we expected it, or does not look believable, we would discuss it, and she would change the design just a little bit so that it actually looks like real cloth. And after that is done, that digital model goes to an actual figure artist who will do the final detailing and creation of the in-game model. And here you see the highly detailed, I believe Barry did it, this is a final sculpture, digital sculpture of the costume. And as you see in here, these are some of the reference materials that I provided for Barry. There is like up top, it's an actual, I believe, 15th century Turkish purse with a gold work embroidery on it. He even insisted, even though I didn't insist on it, but he even wanted to make heishi beads, like little round heishi beads on it. He actually put it at the bottom of the dress. And then there is a sample of antique silk velvet and jacquard fabric. And at the very bottom, this is actually silver filigree jewelry. I actually brought in, because I have a few pieces of the filigree jewelry that I acquired back home, and I brought it in a ring for Barry, and I had him hold on to it for a day so he could study it and see how it's constructed, and then he went in and he modeled all of these little curls to put on the belt right here. And this is where we had discussions about the buttons, where to put them in the middle or a little bit off to the side, but you can see here how he there is all the stitching is added, all of the embroidery and such, and then any kind of hard surface elements, whether it's a belt, pouches, anything that's like the buttons, all of these are added at this step. And then after that, it's texturing, which is actually like here is actually I finished so you could see the entire thing. It's really, really highly detailed, millions of polygons to create that, and a lot of time. So after that, it's actually a low resolution model is created, and it's textured. So there is that's where we do, like grime pass and like try to age the fabrics a little bit, not so that they don't look really worn out unless the costume calls for, but so they looked like they are lived in, and that somebody could potentially have been wearing it for some time. So it doesn't look like it just came out of the dry cleaners and it's like steamed. And that's where actually the fiber that the fabric is made of is very important, because certain fibers actually crinkle in a different way than others. And for example, linen is the most water absorbent material there is, so it actually would have the most staining from wear. Whereas silk, well, especially like silk velvet, there is a different type of wear where fibers just flatten, but it would not exhibit a lot of, just like stains of different color. So this is the final low resolution model as it went into game. So this is pretty much the process how we do the dresses and costumes for Elder Scrolls Online. I would definitely like to hear feedback from you guys. You can send your feedback to Jessica. I would actually like to know how people use these costumes, which are their favorites and for what particular reason, what kind of costumes you would like to see coming up, because I mean, we have a lot of ideas, but we actually like people to enjoy them and actually have some use out of them. So definitely, please let us know how we do. I'll take some questions now.
All right, thank you, Tatiana. Oh, maybe, Mike. All righty, thank you, Tatiana. So we can take some questions, and she had mentioned if you guys have feedback, those of you here or those of you watching live, about the costumes or anything that you create, yeah?
Yes, anything about costumes or, to do with characters.
You can post them on the forums. You can send it to us on Twitter, on Facebook. You can even email us at community@elderscrollsonline.com if you have specific questions or feedback, and we will get them to Tatiana and her team. So does anybody here have any questions? Doesn't look like it, no? Okay. Well, then I guess we will wrap things up. Thank you so much, Tatiana. And our next panel in the ESO HQ will be our ESO Live special here from PAX. That will be starting at 2:30? Now I'm forgetting my own schedule. So we'll see you shortly. Thank you.